Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and oh boy, have I got an exciting video for you today. It is long though. This is a long one. What I ended up doing was meeting up with Sonata and Nivmett from SEMC to talk about the next patch update notes. So at update 3.4 we talked about the update notes there, including hero changes, but most importantly, 3 new items and some major item changes as well. This ended up being a huge video in terms of content. I'm not going to edit it down. I think it's a really, really important one to have its full length. But what I'm going to do is add timestamps in the description below for each individual talking point. So make sure you go and check them out if you want to get to a specific part of the update notes. Otherwise, chill out, watch the whole thing, listen to the whole thing. You don't necessarily need to watch it because I have talked about all of it and sort of narrated it. But guys, it's a really, really cool update, especially for hero and item changes. So let's get into it. Right, guys, we have got something very special today. I have been granted, somehow, some access to update notes for update 3.4. I basically paid Nivmett, and he's sent them to me in an email, and I'm actually joined by Nivmett and Sonata for this particular video. Most of you will know Nivmett. If you don't know Sonata, he's also one of the lead sort of in-game change designers, so he's kind of led up all of the item changes, and obviously Nivmett does a lot of the hero changes. So guys, I'll start with Nivmett. How are you?
I'm good. It's so happy to be here.
Good, because
I always got a crush on you, man. Gosh,
I mean, it's 6:15, but I'm getting a bit flustered here. Christ. Sonata, first time we've actually, I think, spoken on, at least on Discord. I might have met you in real life. It's been a while since I've been to San Francisco, though. How are you?
I am doing well. It is a fine evening, and I hope you are waking up with some good coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going straight back to bed after this. Don't you worry about that. So what we've got here, guys, is the massive update changes for 3.4. Now, all of this is subject to change, as you can see at the very top of the screen. Basically, there are some major fixes, major changes to items, heroes. Probably one of the biggest balance updates Vainglory has done to date, including some new items, which you won't be able to see the art for in this video, but we will be able to discuss some of their potential use. Going to start very quickly with the bugs and cleanups. Malines can no longer recall during Wicked Escapade. Great, I think this is a bug that needed to be changed. There's no point being able to start your recall while you're untargetable. Fix the bug where healing treants in 5v5 was sometimes not used their root ability. I was noticing that quite a lot, but again, just a small cleanup bug there. Jungle minions no longer stand directly on top of each other in 5v5, same with the lane minions, and Mortal Wounds now properly affects all barriers. Thank God Poison Shiv is useful again. So the the two that I want to quickly touch on before we move on, lane minions no longer move to avoid standing on top of a player. Does this mean that the small amount of lane manipulation that you could do trying to stand in front of minions to slow them down or anything like that, does that kind of stopped in its tracks now? Mm-hmm. Is that to say yes? just like a yeah, we've just sorted that out, don't worry about it.
Sorry, that was my phone.
Niv? Is that a Niv question?
Oh, yeah. This would be more of an engineering question, but yes, yes, that would be the case.
Okay.
So, this is mostly to clean up when situations where the minions sort of like bug out a little bit.
Right.
By fixing this, it's going to essentially allow their AI to work much more fluidly, make sure that they don't do something, that they're not supposed to.
Sure. Okay. So this is primarily from a game engineering standpoint rather than anything sort of directly related to wave control or meta control or anything like that. So yeah. And Mortal Wounds now properly affecting all barriers. I think this is something that people have been crying for the last 3 or 4 updates, and obviously it took you guys a while to finally localize exactly what was happening with the Mortal Wounds on barriers. It is just to confirm this was the intended effect of Mortal Wounds. It was supposed to affect barriers.
Yes, as maybe we'll change it in the future. We don't know, but as of right now, that is the intended effect. What was happening? It was affecting some barriers. It wasn't affecting some, like all of them, though. That was the problem. There was
okay.
Some of the more recent ones had a different type of temporary resource that they utilized. So that's where a discrepancy was formed.
Sure, I saw a bit of a rise in Lorelei, for instance, people noticing that her barrier wasn't getting affected for some reason. I'm unsure if Kensei was affected by this, but obviously, if he was affected by not being cut, his barriers being cut by Poison Shiv, obviously that made him really strong. So hopefully we'll see some balancing out across the board, and more consistency, I think, is the key here. Right, to move on quickly to general meta, because what we're going to do here, guys, is we're actually going to jump straight into the items after this particular bit, and then we're going to come back to Nivmett for the heroes. I think Sonata has a limited time here, so we're going to work with what we've got. Cooldown reduction cap is basically, cooldown speed, which you know is cooldown speed in game, is changing to strict cooldown reduction. Now, I won't bore you with the mathematical details there, but it basically changes how the formula works. This is now going to work similar to other MOBAs, where the cooldown that you see on the item directly takes off that cooldown from the ability. The cooldown reduction cap is now 45%, obviously subject to change, but that's what it's sitting at right now. And there is a whole host of cooldown changes. Notably, you'll see that things like Clockwork and Aftershock have had a pretty decent hit to their cooldown value, although theoretically in general you'll notice very little difference in your cooldown changes across the board. Sonata, this is something you were going to pick up. What was this for clarity? Was this to make it so that people could understand cooldown a bit better, or what were the intended design changes here?
So there's actually a lot of changes that we wanted to make with cooldown, especially actually back in the day when I did the Crystal Tree rework. I don't know if you remember back in the day when Broken Myth got changed to just the shield piercing item, and then we introduced 2 new items, Spellfire and Dragon's Eye.
I do remember.
Yeah, so that patch was actually intended to have the cooldown cap, and Clockwork was designed as an item to actually break the cooldown cap with its unique passive. That, however, didn't make it in, and we are now introducing it finally in patch 3.4. So the intended design here is that without cooldown cap, players were, well, first let's get into clarity. And clarity here is that cooldown cap versus, or cooldown reduction versus acceleration. Acceleration is kind of an inverse relationship. You have to do like some kind of division to kind of get exactly what your cooldown is. Whereas for cooldown reduction, you're able to multiply percentage to also get what your cooldown is. And it's easier to do mental math that way, where let's say you have like 40% or whatever the percentage is, you're able to quickly multiply that, 4 out of 10 or 2 out of 5 times your current cooldown. Not only that, the main design change here is that the cooldown acceleration actually was limiting design space, where you can go from having 0% cooldown speed to maybe like 150% or some obnoxiously high amount, where you would have around 70% cooldown reduction. And that was restricting design space on what we can do with hero abilities, where if you build no cooldown speed versus building complete cooldown speed, obviously, like say Heart CC that is guaranteed would be severely limited by this, because you don't need any other stats in order to provide the Heart CC. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you're able to potentially permastun someone, whereas someone who didn't buy any cooldown reduction or cooldown acceleration would not be able to do this, and therefore we must design around the fact that someone could get this amount of cooldown. So that we had to pretty much water down abilities in order to make it so that in this case that this happened, toxic situations don't arise. And cooldown reduction cap helps alleviate for that.
Okay, so are there any heroes that are particularly affected by these cooldown changes more so than others, or are we expected to see it pretty similar across the board?
I suppose that's going to be my thing. So the only heroes that this will really affect are the ones that used to build ridiculous amounts of cooldown. For example, you saw it on Catherine a lot. Catherine would build upwards of like 100+% cooldown very easily. She'd build an Aftershock, a Storm Crown, a Clockwork, Infuse, maybe some Chargers. Like, the amount of items she built was just so she can max out her cooldown as much as possible, so she can get her abilities up as quickly as possible. This was sort of an issue, especially in the past. We ended up raising her cooldowns far above her original design because of this, and so with this change, we can lower a lot of these things. We can start tuning her back down to where she's intended.
I see.
And because there's this cap now, someone who doesn't build mass cooldown on her can play her effectively still as a captain, or if you still want to play her as a jungler, that option is still available.
I see. So let's just theory craft 1 second before we move into the items. Cooldown reduction cap is 45%. So to achieve that now, you actually have to have a considerable investment into cooldown to actually hit that cap. I believe, you'd have to be something going like, let's say you're CP Taka, you'd have to be going something like Aftershock into Clockwork. You'd have to have Halcyon, maybe also Crystal Infusion, depending on your level. So you'd need to have a pretty serious investment to hit that cap now.
I mean, if you look at it, if you're a level 12, usually it's going to be Captain or Crystal Carry. The Infusion will cover 15% of it. So you need roughly 30%. So Taka, if he buys Aftershock and Clockwork or something, or like Reza buys Aftershock and Clockwork, he will actually go over the cap a little bit, but he'll ding it, right?
Sure.
Usually, if you purchase 2 cooldown items plus an infusion, you'll ding the cap.
Sweet. Okay. Right, so that's a brief overview of cooldown. The general idea, guys, is that most of the heroes that you know and love using cooldown reduction, it's very unlikely that you'll see major changes. There are a few select heroes like Catherine who used to stack cooldown reduction who are going to see, in inverted commas, a nerf from this, but have been compensated for when we get to the hero changes, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Right, I'm going to quickly move all the way down to items, and there are big changes in these items, guys, but also new items, and this is where we're going to bring Sonata in. We're going to start with the classic Aftershock max life damage, the Nivmett special. It might be the Sonata special though. The 1% the 1% nerf. Like we said, we're just going to keep doing this until we hit a sweet spot, so we might as well do it 1% per patch. I guess you guys are just trying to get it into a point where Aftershock feels like it's supposed to do its intended design, where it's supposed to be a tank shredding item. Is this kind of where you're getting to with it?
So that is the case. It's definitely, hitting maximum life, it's going to affect tanks more than others. What I think is most important to note is Aftershock is a item that is designed, or that certain heroes will pick up due to low ratios, possible high base damages, or some way to easily trigger it.
Which are a lot of heroes.
A character who generally will target your squishies, but he's still going to pick up an Aftershock, even though it's a tank busting item, right? Like it's a part of certain heroes' kits.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it's at a healthy spot to make sure that those heroes are not too far ahead, and that they can rely on their kits as well, instead of just relying on the item by itself.
Yeah, Aftershock kind of makes certain heroes really good. And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. It is one of those things that if you can chain abilities in the certain time frame that it sort of synergizes Aftershock's internal cooldown, the fact that they have maybe longer cooldown abilities as well, that they're going to benefit from the cooldown reduction, as well as the fact that obviously the max life damage is nice too. It's just an item that does a bit of everything, and there was just a point, I think, in the meta where it did everything too well. So I guess we're just starting to lower it down to say that, okay, well, the max life damage is a trade-off. Obviously, the lower we make this, the softer, I guess, you will hit when using it. But yeah, I think the idea and the design philosophy there is fine, and if it needs tuning, I guess we'll see another 1% nerf in the next update.
That is correct.
Okay, moving on. All boots movement speed minus 0.1. What was the design philosophy here? Is it just all the speed updates on 5v5 made everyone too quick?
This is not as bad as it seems. All boots have been reduced by 0.1, but important note that all heroes have been increased by 0.1.
Yeah. Okay.
So essentially, this means you will be faster without boots early game, so you don't feel so sluggish moving around.
Okay.
But once you buy boots, everything will even out again.
Okay, so what this is basically saying is that you're going to feel slightly quicker coming out of the base. You might feel that you don't need an investment in boots as early, especially if you're relying on boots to be able to dodge skill shots and stuff. So it might make some of your lane matchups a little bit easier in the early game. So yeah, okay. Oh, so basically this is compensated for in the hero section, and we'll get to it. Is where we're going with that. Attack speed changes. So attack speed changes are nerfed on Alternating Current, nerfed on Bonesaw, nerfed on Shiv, nerfed on Trigger. Infusion got nerfed, and Shiver Steel also got nerfed. So across the board changes for attack speed. Now, Nivmett, before I ask why, is this compensated for in the heroes, or is this just a strict nerf to attack speed?
No, this is compensated for in the heroes as well. All heroes, essentially, their attack cooldown timer is being reduced by 0.1. So while most are 0.8, so most are coming down to 0.7. This makes them scale better with attack speed, though, and they were getting a substantial spike in damage. So we've lowered that down to compensate, but this will also mean those heroes that don't build attack speed, like a support or something, will feel a little bit more fluid as they're fighting.
Okay, so basically, most heroes getting a shorter duration between attack animations or between their general attacks in sort of the general status, and giving some attack speed to them naturally to then reduce attack speed on items overall. So you how much of a change is this in the late game? Do you see a minor DPS increase, or is it generally pretty samey across the board? It just feels more fluid.
It's pretty samey across the board until you need to have, I think, 3 attack speed items, and then you'll feel a slight increase in DPS.
So maybe Ringo mains out there might see.
Yeah, like anyone with a very extreme, like high, like 80% on Ringo's twirling, he'll feel a bit more. He'll feel this a bit more.
Okay, so he might get a sort of a slight DPS increase in the late game, essentially.
I'd say once he builds his first item, he builds plus his twirling plus an infusion, he'll feel it.
Okay.
Slightly.
Yes. So, we're going to move on to this next item. I'm going to bring Sonata in here because I believe he was leading the design on some of these. Capacitor Plate. It's a new item. 450 health, 30 armor, 30 shield, 15 cooldown reduction, a bit of energy regeneration. Your heals and barriers are 20% stronger. And another passive, your heals and barriers also grant other allies, heroes, a bonus movement speed for 2 seconds, 10-second cooldown per hero. So, you're bringing in an item that is designed to be a sort of a core item for people like Lorelei, for instance, or sort of those kind of captains who are a bit more supporty on the backline, because I think that is something that we were missing in Vainglory. We had a lot of great tank items and support items for the big, beefy frontliners, but we didn't have that many for your squishier backliners like Lorelei, who are supposed to be that sort of ranged supportive captain. So talk to me a bit about the design of this item, Sonata.
Right. So when we're starting with the new items, let's actually talk about why, or the design direction for all the new items that are being introduced this patch. And the design direction for them is that we wanted to introduce new items that increase the build diversity for supports. So, all these new items will be mainly for supports. You will generally pick this up on a support unless something, it might be good on not like less. I guess if you're not pure support, if you're like a supporty laner, say if you're like a top lane Lorelei, then yes, you'll still want to build this.
Yeah.
But these items are they're basically passive actives with clear windows of power. So these new items will have pretty strong effects that will turn the tide of battle, assuming you use it correctly. And this window of power is also clear to opponents, to which, let's say for Capacitor Plate has a cooldown per hero, and if your heal or barrier is on cooldown, it basically enhances your heal and barrier, which means that the enemy is now playing around your cooldown on your heal or barrier, which would also give a movement speed buff. Mm-hmm. So it pretty much, yes, it is for those, not just the backline supports, but also any support that is generally providing heals or barriers for their team.
This also works on Fortified Life, I believe.
Okay, so Finn,
yes.
so someone like Finn would get use out of this potentially using Polite Company. So Polite Company will now give a team-wide movement speed buff. Which
yes.
That seems pretty goddamn cool. I'm not gonna lie. I do have a question though. Does this synergize with Fountain coming from the source? I.e., if you had Fountain in this item, would Fountain receive the benefits of Capacitor Plate?
So in this case, yes. If you are providing a team-wide heal, you will proc this passive, and your Fountain will heal more.
And will also give a team-wide movement speed buff. That definitely feels like we're solidifying Fountain as a pretty core item if you're going to run with this. I think I'm pretty settled in the fact that Fountain is just one of those items that you, in most cases, need to have. So this seems like a pretty brainless combo in a way, not like in a bad way, but like I guess that brainless is the wrong way to describe it. Like a no-brainer is the better way of describing it. Like if you want to have that kind of playstyle, you bring a Fountain and a Capacitor Plate, you suddenly have now a form of engage as well if you need it.
Yeah, so you want to really decide if the movement speed bonus is worth it. So if your team's not able to capitalize on that movement speed, then you are pretty much not able to capitalize on half the item. So
yeah. So it's definitely interesting. I think it's going to be an item that has got plenty of use. And Nivmett just raised a great point as he typed it to me. This is one of the first times that we're seeing item synergies between two specific items in Vainglory. Is this a design philosophy that you're looking to continue in the future?
It is definitely something that I wanted to hit. Back when I did the Crystals Tree rework, it was about making sure that each item had its own identity, and that you're able to really create your own play style, or really hone into the kind of plays that you want to make, or you want to make against your opponents. So these kind of item synergies are always something that we're looking for.
So, moving on, Coat of Plate shield is down. I would guess this is because you're trying to make it a more distinct path between buying shield and armor, and just lowering that down. On I would guess on either side, as I can see Kinetic Shield just down there as well, armor's going down. Is this just trying to make it a more distinct defensive path for both sides?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Not much we need to talk about on that. Clockwork, rework, passive upon damaging an enemy hero with an ability, refresh all ability cooldowns by 10%, maximum 3 seconds. This can only occur once every 3 seconds. So really making cooldown or Clockwork feel like that item that synergizes heavily with either longer cooldowns, but also, again, this will work nicely with something like Celeste as well. What's the what's the changes here? Because it's not too different from what it was before.
Well, so actually the major change here is that there's a maximum of 3-second discount now. So for those longer cooldowns, you're actually going to see a nerf on those, whereas you get a buff onto the shorter cooldowns where it is a higher percentage. This is mainly just to prevent ults from always constantly being up. I think the old Clockwork was pretty much generating ultimates like it was nothing, where ultimates were coming out 3 times a fight.
I'm sure everybody who's played against Celeste in the recent updates will know that they could get about 50 Solar Storms off in a single fight. So it's definitely felt that way anyway.
Yeah, this is just a slight rework, but you will feel it.
Yeah, okay, so it's going to be, obviously on the longer cooldowns, you'll feel it because it goes up to a maximum of 3 seconds, which means, again, what occurring once every 3 seconds, your minute plus cooldowns are suddenly not going to be getting discounted by ridiculous amounts, but your shorter cooldowns now will kind of synergize nicely. So if you've got any A-B combos that are sort of 10 seconds or so, you will start to see a significant improvement going for Clockwork, essentially.
So essentially, what also I would really like to point out, the best way to look at it, if it's something that's a cooldown that's 30 seconds or less, it is a buff.
Yep.
If it is anything higher, it's not taking the full advantage of it. That's a really easy way to really look at it.
Yeah. So 10% 3 is 10% 30 or whatever you want to look at it there. Echo is removed. Echo is gone from the game. Okay, so what was it about Echo that felt like you guys needed to remove it? Because it's not been that, it's only been in the game for about 1.5 years, right? I think, or something like that. I remember it getting debuted at the 2016 World Championships, I think. So, what was it about Echo that made you guys want to remove it?
So this item's been problematic for a very long time. It's kind of tied in with the cooldown changes where, if the original cooldown cap, I guess, of like natural 70% reduction before was bad, Echo is literally 100% reduction. I get to cast his ability again. And while that created some cool plays, it wasn't necessarily good for gameplay, especially for, say, it starts limiting design space the same way that cooldown was limiting design space. That we even had to make some exceptions, say with Arden Gauntlet, where we had to say, oh, if you make another gauntlet, the first gauntlet disappears.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of special cases that we had to make because of Echo, and Echo just wasn't an item that is particularly healthy for design space, especially around hero abilities.
So,
yeah.
I chip in. So essentially, a lot of our issues is during the design process, there were a lot of abilities that we had to like either forego or sort of approach in a different manner just due to the existence of this item. And the way it was used, it's used on a few heroes, its plays were being done in sort of a gimmicky fashion. It didn't tend to be until sort of like amazing, like, wow, that was awesome. It'd usually be comboed with a Catherine ult or a Grace ult, something that will come out and all you're doing is extending its duration of, whether it's the silence or the barrier. And so it created sort of a gimmicky playstyle in which a lot of these changes, as you've seen, like Catherine's silence duration used to be much longer prior to Echo. But after Echo came out, we started slashing numbers, and it came down, like her silence came down to a feeble 2 seconds. Grace is also a similar situation where her cooldown used to be much lower, but just due to the existence of this item, it ended up having to be increased significantly, right? So it created limitations not only in terms of designing cool new hero abilities, but it also limited hero balance. Because now you're forced to balance a hero assuming that they will build this item.
Exactly, yeah. And I think one of the problems with Echo is that it can either be extremely oppressive or useless on certain heroes. So you saw these massive discrepancies between this item use, and honestly, it made also, especially 3v3, you probably saw this more than you saw it in 5v5, it made counterplay almost impossible in certain situations. It made counterplay with certain abilities just so difficult because of the existence of this item, because obviously it increased the power level of certain heroes through the roof as well. Certain heroes just became meta because of this item. So now I guess the way that we look at it is that when you choose to use your ultimate or a big impactful ability, you have to really make a decision about using that ability. It's no longer, well, if I whiff the first one, I've always got Echo, so I can just spam it in the middle of a team fight and hope it has some impact. Now it's like, I choose that Arden Gauntlet, it's got to be a really well-placed Gauntlet. I Catherine Silence at exactly the right time because I don't have a backup. That Grace ultimate has got to go on the right target in this team fight, otherwise I don't have a backup to just do it on someone else. So it's aside from the design changes there, in terms of gameplay, it's making people make more impactful and make them have more weight attached to the decisions when they use those team fight changing abilities, because they just don't have that reset button now.
That's great.
Right, this will make ultimates feel a lot more like ultimates, and this way we're actually able to design abilities to be a lot more impactful, given that you're not able to be like, I cast this and I cast this again.
Good. Well, let's rip Echo. You served us well for about 1.5 years, but not going to miss you. Fountain of Renewal. Health down by 50. Okay, well, we'll just sweep over this as small health change. I mean, Fountain of Renewal is such a core item that you have to do something to give it a trade-off, and I guess just reducing the health overall. Unless there is... Nivmett's about to tell me that everyone gets a health buff. We've talked about the shielding changes. Again, just trying to make the individual path a bit more unique. Life Sprig, health down. Oh, Life Sprig. That's spring. You can tell it's early and I've had about 2 hours sleep. I can't actually read. Okay, so 2 new items that we will again talk over. I'm going to talk about the first one. Pulse Weave. 700 health. So that is a beefy item. Passive. Upon taking damage from an enemy hero, gain bonus movement speed for 3 seconds and then deal 200 plus 15% of bonus health damage and slow enemies by 25%, plus a certain percentage of the bonus health for 2 seconds with a 30-second cooldown. 10% increased movement speed, and obviously you get the Life Spring passive, so I'm guessing this builds out of Life Spring. This, to me, sounds like very much similar to Righteous Glory from League of Legends, except for it deals a bit of damage once you get to that location, but it's only for just your individual hero. Sonata, talk to me about this, because I think this item sounds pretty goddamn cool.
So yeah, this item is actually something that I strongly recommended on the first item pass, and that was because I think it really creates for cool plays where, you know, you're able to well, let's go with the intention of this item first. And this item is obviously meant for tanks or initiators, you know, someone who wants to take that first hit and then be like, okay, we're going in.
Finn says thank you, by the way.
Yeah, so you're actually able to be like, I'm not only blocking shots for my team, but I'm also able to, you know, go right in and start the fight. You know, maybe even, you know, if Finn ults someone or ults their whole team, you're able to then proc the slow on them, and suddenly they can't get out. So this item is really meant for those initiators, so that you're able to create really cool plays. You know, the bonus movement speed for 3 seconds, you're getting a substantial incentive to go in, and if you aren't able to take advantage of this, you know, people can, you're not only not able to utilize this item, it's kind of goes on cooldown for a pretty long duration.
Mm-hmm. The flip side of it is it's actually could be an interesting defensive item choice for carries as well. Not that you might buy it, obviously it will never replace reflex block in some ways, but you could use that passive just to help you kite better or get away from an assassin threat, for instance, and the 700 health makes you a bit beefier. So I think whilst that might not be the intended use, it's got a lot of variability in what you can do with this item, and I think it looks pretty cool. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to single-handedly bring certain captains back in to the meta, especially in 5v5. Just because of what it could do in terms of initiation comps. Niv, what are you gonna follow up on this?
It really helps. Also, it's a great anti-poke comp item. So, for example, I'm sure you've experienced a bit of CP Kestrel in the last patch or two.
Mm-hmm.
She has the ability to really like poke you from range, and you feel like a lot of captains don't have any tools in their kit to really stop that. They just sort of have to take the arrows and tank it for the team sometimes. In this scenario, if she shoots an arrow and you can use this movement speed, run at her. Let's say I'm playing Arden, I can punch to her, or I could just run at her, whatever is Catherine, Merciless Pursuit forward, and then do a large AoE in an area that will not only slow the Kestrel, but also stop her from going stealth because you deal damage to her, right? So this item gives great options for those initiating type heroes.
And Sonata, you're going to follow up on a little bit extra outside of the intended use of this item.
So while it could be the case that, you know, a carry can pick this up, I think with the new changes to Slumbering Husk that will hit very soon, that you will see, you'll probably, because the item gives health and carries naturally have lower armor and shield. Armor and shield are therefore better buys on them, given the diminishing returns. So it could be a good item.
I'm just spitballing here. I don't think it will be bought by carries at all. But it's just one of those things that it has a limited potential use across the board. That just because of the nature of it, it has ways that we may not see from this particular conversation, but, you know, then people might find a way to make it work on maybe, you know, for instance, some carries like Vox where they go double defensive item, for instance, you know, so it's
right. It was intended that carries generally don't want to pick this up because, you know, we have bonus health scaling on this, so that generally if you don't build, you know, the amount of health that we expect you to build, you know, you generally won't get to use the item to the full extent. And, you know, maybe if it is going out of the intended, you know, design space, we then shift the bonus movement speed to also scale off of bonus health.
Yeah, and the 10%. The reason I was looking at it is 10% base movement speed looks pretty nice for a ranged carry. For instance, I'm thinking, oh, I've got some health. I've got a movement speed steroid. If I get starting attacked by, let's say, a attacker jumps on me and I need to get away like super quickly, like I suddenly get a movement speed buff and I got my 10%. But obviously, this is I think with this item, it's got so many possibilities to be used. As you guys always do, we'll see what happens when we put it out there. You guys will see what happens when you put it out there, and
the public will figure out how to use it, and then we'll move from there.
Because if suddenly this becomes like some broken items on ranged carriers, you might be thinking that's not what we wanted for the item, and then shift things around. But I think for the most part, Sonata is right. We're unlikely because of the need for the as I did a video recently, because of the need for defensive investment in shielding and armor, because of the amount of reduction that you get. It's obviously better to invest in that on carry specifically over something like this. But this item is cool because it's going to help and cover a lot of the weaknesses that some captains, like for instance, like I mentioned Finn, that one of the reasons Finn sucked is if you blocked his hook, he just was there like a lemon. He just sat there like a lemon, and he just took free hits. And this is going to be an item that on Finn, now suddenly if you hit him, he has a way to get in there without having to use his hook. So he can get in there, use that polite company, use a quibble, and then the force to core can be something that you use afterwards. So it's because this is actually something that you saw on Finn. People built journey boots on him specifically to alleviate the problem that he had. And obviously that limited what he could do with war treads and so on and so forth. So now suddenly this plus war treads for Finn, and you've got a viable way to get Finn into a 5v5 team composition, 5v5 team fight. So yeah, and what I'm also noticing from here is that suddenly, and I think this is the intended design purpose, it's not just Fountain Crucible every game on a on a captain, and then then you decide what you want to do after that. Suddenly it's like, wait a second, we have got plenty of items to choose from here that can cover a specific team composition or cover what we specifically want to do in a game. So whilst I move on that point, let's go on to Rook's Decree, which is another new item. 600 health, 2.5 energy regen, 15% cooldown reduction, and a passive. After using an ability, your next basic attack against an enemy hero applies a barrier, 200 plus 15% of bonus health to all nearby allies for 2 seconds with an 8-second internal cooldown. I'll bring you in again, Sonata. Design thoughts on this particular item?
Right, so this item is more for the counter engage. You know, if their team engaged onto you, you're able to pop a barrier for your allies. It's obviously meant for captains again, because you know you're not providing yourself with that barrier, so you are only providing your allies with this barrier. So if you're a top lane Blackfeather, you generally probably wouldn't want to buy this item. That being said, it's an item that is probably better utilized on ranged supports where you're not expected to do the initiation. Let's say if you're a Grace and you A into the enemy team, you proc Rook's Decree, but then your team isn't really there to follow up on using the barrier. So that generally, if it's ranged supports, you're able to then capitalize on the enemy engaging onto you, utilize the entire barrier, and be able to utilize again if the cooldown comes up before the fight is over.
And I'm guessing this also has a wonderful inter-item synergy with the other new item, which is that capacitor plate. So I'm guessing you're going to get a synergy with that here as well.
Yes, this will synergize with capacitor plate.
Oh, I like this. I like this. This sounds pretty spicy. The counter engage potential there from this item is pretty insane, but also just strictly having it in an engage style composition as well. If you Arden Vanguard somebody, then blood for blood, which counts as a basic attack, and your team is near you, you've got a great style of engage coming out if you've got those two items too. So again, something that you guys have done really well, I think, with these items is that they've got multiple possibilities for use. In terms of loads of different team compositions. Even though they have their intended use, like you said, Sonata, there are ways that people might find synergies in these items that end up even surprising us. So I think that all of these items are really cool. Honestly, really, really great design. It gives captains much more thought, and I think it makes the captain role cooler as well, because it feels like you have more impact rather than just, I've got to press Fountain and I have to Crucible an ability and that's my impact for this team fight. Now you actually have meaningful decisions in team fights to make as captains, aside from just when I use my fountain and when I use my crucible, because there's lots more going on. You have to be on your toes a lot more with these items specifically, and there's a lot more things to play around as well. Like, you have to be aware of these items on the enemy team and try and play accordingly as well.
Right. I think the battlefield dynamic will really change very drastically, very rapidly. And if you're not able to capitalize on how the tide is changing, you will not be able to utilize, or I guess you will not be able to play the role to the best, or I guess the 100% optimal plays. So it all gives you something more to think about. How do you position? What's your next step after you've made this first move?
All right, and then we're going to quickly round up, because I said I wanted this video to be 40 minutes. Well, we're at 40 minutes now. And we've still got to get through the heroes. So it's okay, guys. It's all right. We're good.
Yeah, we'll go.
This is now podcast, by the way. This is now podcast level of design. But don't worry, guys. If you have made it this far, good. I will also have timestamps in the description, so you guys can click to the juicy bits if you really want to just get to the good bits, which is all of it, by the way. But obviously new items are always going to be fun. Slumbering Husk, price has gone up. The build plate has changed. It no longer builds out of Dragon Heart. It builds out of Coat of Plates and Kinetic Shield. The health is completely gone, and now it gives armor and shield, but I'm guessing it still gives that same passive of if you get hit, you get a load of basically life. This is an interesting change, because it's essentially now acting similarly to what I guess a reflex block is designed to do. It's designed to block a hell of a lot of damage, but even if you get hit by that ability now, you've got that massive shield to provide. But it also has the added functionality of, hey, it gives you armor and shield, which, like we discussed earlier, is very, very useful on a carrier, and it's often why people didn't take this over a reflex block, because they just liked the fact they got shielding as well as their reflex block. This now means that you have a bit more thought process. You get more armor and shield across the board from this item, apart from, obviously, respectively, Metal Jacket and Aegis will always outshine in their respective areas, but this now is a bit of a middle ground, but it also gives you that massive shield, or rather that massive... is it fortified life that Slumbering Husk gives you?
Yes.
Yeah, it gives you that massive fortified life now.
It finally no longer fights against itself.
Yes.
Which is great.
Always good.
Because, the health was actually counter intuitive for its passive. So we did the math behind it. It was just, you wondered why it gave you life, because it just meant that you had to take more damage to get its effect, especially when it gave you no armor and shield.
Oh, there we go. And I feel like I'm looking at this now, and for me, I'm like, this is now a lazy man's Aegis. It's like, if I'm
very good, it's incredibly good.
If I'm bad at using reflex block, this is the item for me, because now I don't have to.
Well, it will save you from the CC, but it will save you from burst without CC.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I look at it is it's equivalent. If you get CC'd, you're likely going to start to take a huge amount of damage. The point of CC is to set you up to take a lot of damage in most cases, especially as a carry. Now, if I get CC'd and I take a load of damage, at least I have the Slumbering Husk can back me up, basically. It's like, if I can't block abilities, Slumbering Husk will help me out anyway, which is cool. I think it's not going to replace the functionality of Aegis and Reflex Block, because obviously at the very high tiers you don't want to get caught by CC that would otherwise impede your positioning in a team fight or the way that you're moving. But for me, if I'm a tier 4 to tier 6 player and I'm awful at using Reflex Blocks, I'm looking at this item and saying, hey, now I don't have to. Like, now I can build this item and actually feel comfortable in a team fight without having to worry about blocking at the right time.
This also really helps with we're seeing a lot, like, it seems every patch that there's one assassin that's sort of like running rampant, right? You had like Koshka, and then you had Taka, and then you have Reza. There's always one that seems to be really dominant in its current form. This is, and always has been, its original design is an anti-burst item. It is very much an anti-assassin item. So now when that Reza jumps on you, he's going to pop that passive, and you have 2 seconds to fight him off. 2 seconds to burst him down, to CC, or to get away. Like, you have breathing room, and that's what this item was created to do.
And we're going to finally see that intended design as well, because it also gives you some benefits outside of that passive, which previously it really didn't. Previously, if you didn't have the passive up on Slumbering Husk, it was kind of a useless item in a lot of ways. Yes, the 500 health was nice, but in late game, 500 health lasts about 2 basic attacks if you don't have the armor and shielding to back that up. So finally, you get a bit of armor and shielding out of it. This will push most carries up to about 145 armor and shield respectively, which is a pretty sizable reduction in damage. And so it's like you said, Niv, it's going to have a lot of functionality, and I think we'll see a bit more play as well. Moving on quickly, Tornado Trigger. Basic attacks grant you a 10% bonus base bonus movement speed for 1.2 seconds. Doesn't look like it has an internal cooldown, so this can continue, I guess, for as long as you are basic attacking. And the critical damage amp has gone off. So what was the thought process here, Sonata?
I will let Niv explain this one.
Oh, Niv then. Okay.
So essentially, it's to create a stronger identity between Tornado Trigger and Tyrant's Monocle. Tyrant's Monocle being, your damage-oriented crit item, while Tornado Trigger is your more fleet of foot attacks. Like you're attacking faster, you're moving faster, you're feeling faster. This also gives you a great option just if you want to be able to stick to a target a little bit easier, or kite back from a target a little bit easier. That 10% movement speed goes a long way. It's multiplicative, so you're gonna, for heroes who have high base move speed, this is a great item. For example, on Ringo, he twirls, he gets 1.2 bonus move speed. Amplify that by plus his base, plus his boots, amp it by 10%. All of a sudden, you've got this whirling dervish of a gunslinger flying around, which feels really awesome to use. I really enjoy this new change. You do get the DPS drop, so you stick better, you kite better, but it takes a little bit longer. You can't blow up your target just quite as easily.
Sure, and obviously this will have that added sort of synergy of going well with melee. It's a weapon power based carries. If they now will not just have to land that first hit and then get kited away. Now they've got something to allow them to keep up with their target as well. So it's going to have a functionality on both sides of the picture, which is really nice. And so if we see critical strike based builds in the meta specifically, then I think this is an item that will hold a lot of value. Especially across 3v3 and 5v5. I think it's going to be a good item for both instances. So yeah. Well, those are all the item changes. Lots and lots to talk about there with all the new items and a lot of the big changes coming through. And I don't know if Sonata, if you want to stick around for the heroes, or if you're heading off now. But if so, thank you so much for joining for that item section.
Thank you for having me. I do need to head out, but thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. And now me and Nivmett will go and tackle all of the rest of the hero changes, and we'll try and get through it in the next 15-20 minutes. Otherwise, you guys will be on YouTube for an hour of your life.
Super rapid.
Okay.
All right, have a nice night.
See you later, Sonata. Okay, so 3v3 meta, new Scout Cam and Healing Flask buttons added. And so basically, is this removing Contraption, or is this alongside Contraptions and Scout Traps?
You just have one cam that has a decent cooldown on it, and the flask is no longer in your inventory.
Okay,
so it equalizes the two modes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, and but you can still get Scout Traps in 3v3, but you just get one longer cooldown Scout Cam to help control vision in specific areas of the map.
Correct.
And you can't buy Scout Cam upgrades in 3v3.
Nope.
Good,
no.
There we go. We can move on from that bit. It's a cool change to 3v3. I'm sure a lot of the 3v3 fans will enjoy having that extra piece of vision, and we'll see how that synergizes with things like with Scout Cam as well. But I think now your tri-brush control and Kraken control will be that much easier for specific compositions. Let's have a look. All heroes movement speed. There we go. We talked about that earlier. We won't cover that again. Let's go on to the first hero change, Batiste. Bad Mojo, Crystal Ratio backup, and Crystal Splash Ratio backup. Now, CP Batiste definitely was falling to the wayside compared to weapon power in 5v5. He definitely felt a little bit underpowered. I'm guessing this is just giving some mojo back to our Bad Mojo user.
That's what you did there, yeah. So there's a bit of a sprucing for Batiste, just get him right back out there. increases his burst a bit, sort of capitalize when he gets that good empowered bad mojo. You really want to feel rewarded for it. This is right up that alley.
Yeah, I think it's something that he needed as well. But CP Batiste was definitely feeling a little bit underwhelming over the last couple of updates, and it's nice to see this chap get a bit of love on that side of the field. Catherine, this is the changes you were talking about earlier, Niv. Merciless Pursuit cooldown overall is down. Blast Tremor Silence is back up, all the way up to 3 seconds at Overdrive, meaning that Overdrive is now very valuable. And the cooldown is also down. This is to compensate for the cooldown reduction changes and also the Echo removal as well, to make that Overdrive on the ult feel more impactful, I guess, Niv.
Yep, very much true. Very true.
Yeah, so we kind of covered that earlier on. Churnwalker, Futility of Life damage sharing up. And Trespass is now centered around Churnwalker. So damage sharing up, I guess, is going to make him feel a bit more overall wombo combo-y. You know, if
Churnwalker's always that character that's sort of like, once I get this set up, I'm going to, like, my team is going to come in and hit, like, that Scarf ult is going to come in, that Jewel ult is going to come in, whatever that combo, that wombo combo that comes into your mind, and they're going to capitalize on it. So one of the issues, so Churnwalker, the damage sharing wasn't enough. We tried to sort of overcompensate for it for 5v5, and it just, people weren't getting 5 hooks out. That was unreasonable to expect. So we've increased this once more, sort of giving him back that power I mean, if you can get 5 hooks out, hooray for you. You're going to do some good damage. But aside from that, this is going to really help. And then this is the now that it's centered, his ult is centered around Churnwalker. He can even use this potentially as a slight escape because he now can go backwards.
Brilliant. So basically this is giving Churnwalker more directional control as opposed to relying on where his targets are. So it gives him more control of his own ultimate in terms of the space that he uses. It might limit some of his, I guess, his deep diving playmaking potential, but it also gives him the options to be able to use it to back out, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So Churnwalker, whether we'll see him in 5v5 again, I think Churnwalker is super good 3v3. I think in 5v5, Nivmett highlighted the problem. It is very difficult to get multiple chains off on multiple people without getting CC'd down in some way, shape, or form. Maybe now that the increased damage sharing here means that even if you get a couple of hooks off, you can get enough impactful work done to make the team fight happen, or at least get damage off across multiple carries in the enemy team. Churnwalker, for me, has always been a good 5v5 captain. People just weren't using him a huge amount compared to some of the others. He's got some incredible gank potential, just because I think having a captain that's got gank potential makes them valuable on 5v5. But we'll see. We'll see how much this affects him in overall play. So we'll look at Fortress then. Damage, back further down. Speed boost is up though, so basically shifting power away from damage, making him more utility focused for his Truth of the Tooth. Percent damage is down as well. Fortress can't catch a break here, but I understand what you're doing to him because he does have an incredibly high win rate. He is
actually the highest.
Yes.
The undisputable champion for the last, what, four months now?
Yeah, he's been super high. I think you're trying to create an identity for him here as this kind of engage type support with this movement speed and that kind of thing, and take that onus away from him just being able to bite a huge hole out of his opponent whilst building captain items, basically.
Yes. So there's a couple things to it. So reliable damage is, let me be more specific. Fortress's reliable damage was particularly sort of nasty. He has 2 abilities that both deal damage, that are both targeted and do high amounts of damage. So all Fortresses were doing is they'll target their target, they jump at them, bite them, and combined with the Aftershock and Storm Crown procs, all of a sudden you find that half of your life is now gone. In addition to that, Fortress already has a lot of power currently, especially around his ultimate in 5v5. It's arguably one of the most powerful abilities in all of 5v5 currently.
Mm-hmm.
You slap that ult and it's very likely, if done well, and you will just win that team fight, unless they have a decent counter engage. So you have all these options already between reliable damage, utility. The lifesteal on is an ultimate, a highly impacting ult. he just had too much, and we really because he's a support, we wanted to pull some of that damage away, that reliable damage away.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, but also you've compensated for it with the speed boost, meaning that, you know, he's being focused more on that utility, trying to create that identity for Fortress. Is the kind of he is still that pull the trigger and go type captain, but now he's not also going to be doing 50% of your team's damage in a game.
He works amazing with the new pulse weave, the AoE that deals damage and slows.
Yeah, absolutely, I can see that for sure. Let's have a look now. Grace Divine Intervention cooldown. This is just talking about those echo changes, again, making Grace a bit more in control of her own ultimate. You might still be able to get 2 ultimates off in a team fight, but now you have to be able to use that heroic perk a bit more effectively and not just rely on echo.
That is correct.
Yeah. Kensei, oh boy, this boy, I can't wait to read these.
We hear your cries.
Weapon power is up in the early game, but scales the same way. So he's got a very high early game weapon power. I guess to compensate for his weak early game, but also
it's not. Yeah. So most heroes deal roughly like 50 damage in the early game. Kensei deals like 23.
Yeah.
He was dealing roughly 50%. His auto attacks roughly deal 50% what other heroes do. And this made his early game really ridiculously weak. To compensate, though, we did lower that late game down.
Yeah.
So I'll let you finish reading the notes, and then we can talk about it a bit more.
So focus mind here. Life scaling is down a small percentage, 0.008. Barrier scaling is down 0.001, and the bonus damage is down by 20%. His Path of the Ronin stun duration is down by 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4 seconds respectively, maxing out at 1 second. So even when you were overdrive, that will now be lower than your second level in that ability previously. So overall, try to limit that scaling of Kensei. Because he did scale very well into the late game, but like you said, he had almost a pathetic early game in some instances. But just trying to limit his late game prowess.
Yeah, we lowered the percent life damage that he was dealing by roughly 25%. The barrier came down by 20%. The bonus damage came down by 20%. 20% is original. And then in addition to that, plus the CC is lower. So while we did raise his early game so it wasn't so limp noodle, his late game got a significant hit across the board.
Yeah, and I think 20% nerfs across the board will be enough to see how he fares. I still think Kensei is going to be strong. I still feel Kensei is going to be a super strong late game carry. I think that's kind of what his design is in a way.
He is a hyper carry.
Yeah, he is supposed to be a late game melee hyper carry, which is great because we don't have too many of those. Blackfeather arguably was one of them, and now Kensei is another. So yeah, but he's not going to feel as oppressive as he did. The one thing that I, in my mind, am thinking about is whether the attack speed changes in the late game are going to benefit him, because he does really function super well with attack speed, and whether you will still see. For me, and this might sound drastic, I would be thinking about adding another basic attack to his charge up on the barrier to make it 4. Just because I felt like he was so easy to chain those 3 basic attacks to get the barrier over and over again, or some sort of diminishing returns there. But we'll see what this.
It's your 4th one.
but the 5th one basically. But that might seem too drastic. That's me going in there with the hammer. But I think the 20% nerfs across the board will limit that power in the late game, and we'll have to see how he functions. I guess if he still remains oppressive, you'll have other ideas. Going down the line.
I've got a big bag of tools to.
I'm hoping all of those tools are a hammer. Moving on. Kestrel Glimmer Shot crystal ratio down again. Kestrel's been ping-ponging around with this crystal ratio on her her Glimmer Shot. It's really difficult to find her in a place where she's not oppressive but also not super weak.
Yeah. So, this. Change, obviously, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced it. CP Kestrel is a high burst, high range, very safe carry to play. And while this didn't affect lower tiers as much, this change is targeted more towards higher level play. She was just very dominant, and the amount with proper positioning, there was very little someone can do, especially once combined with Spellfire. She puts down a trap, possibly two on top of each other, and just starts unloading arrows. If anyone tries to engage on her, Spellfire will trigger the traps, dealing an obscene amount of damage. It's now she needs to she doesn't burst you quite as hard when she pops out.
Yeah, and I think I'm the Doom will be very sad, but the rest of the world won't be, and that'll be decent to see Kestrel, especially when she spikes super hard with her first item as well. She can be super oppressive in the mid game, as you know, also scaling nicely into the late game. So I think a lot of Kestrel players won't feel a huge difference from this, but especially when the people who are in the high level who are able to chain glimmer shot after glimmer shot after glimmer shot, they will see an overall nerf to the damage output that they have. Lyra, Imperial Sigil detonation heal ratio down by 20%, and the duration of Bright Bulwark down. Now, Lyra it's difficult to get into a position where she feels comfortable, because naturally, as a healing support, you're always going to have benefits over others, especially in the laning phase and 3v3 specifically as well. She was super strong on the last update. Loads of people loved Lyra, and she was played pretty much consistently across the board. What are the thoughts here behind the changes to her A and B?
So first off, with the detonation heal, when you threw out the heal and you popped it immediately, you received because the cooldown started after it pops. You almost equalized to where it was before. Leaving it out gave you a little bit more heal, but it wasn't enough. With this change, if you're going to throw it out and do an emergency, throw it out, heal you, give you movement speed boost, you're not going to get the full amount. We want to really stress that Lyra puts down this heal and creates a zone area that will heal you. We don't want the proper way to play Lyra. Just be like, here's a heal, pop it. Okay,
yeah.
Come there, throw this heal, pop it, and just repeat and rinse until that wasn't the intended design.
No. So basically what you're saying is that Lyra players now need to think about where they're placing their sigil in a teamfight situation, in skirmish situations. You can't just throw it down, just double tap A, basically. You can't just throw it down, tap A again,
Correct.
And rinse and repeat, because that was an uninteractive playstyle for Lyra, and also made her decision making all centered around her B. Now she's got decision making to make with her B and her A. And that healing zone should be something that you play around, not something that you just expect to heal you on the spot.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, the Bright Bulwark, we increased the duration back up, but we found it was just being a little bit too oppressive. She was creating a good Lyra player could almost cut a team fight in half using her Bulwark. It comes with an incredibly strong slow. And then we were also getting a situation with slows double applying because you could walk across it twice. This is going to really... a skillful Lyra player will still be able to capitalize on it, but it's not going to be as much of a freebie. It's not going to just stay in there and you have this tree house to yell down at the enemy team and throw things at them from.
So in the words of Freak, this will separate the good Lyras from the great Lyras. something like that. I can never remember what he actually says, but yeah. Lorelei, new water denizen, now gains the river buff both ways. So a little buff to Lorelei to make her ability to roam between lanes really nice in 5v5, and also thematically works quite nicely with her.
Yeah. You will find there is another river denizen in our game who receives this buff, who needs it more than her, in all honesty. I'll just touch up on it. Finn, being a river troll, now can move. His weakness has always been his movement speed. He's now able to move a little bit more easily between the different lanes, thanks to his ability to swim well.
Hey, well, there we go. And I think that is definitely a change that Finn needed. One of the major reasons you never saw him is because he just didn't have the same roam potential as the other roams in the game, or the captains in the game. And he just felt like he was always one step behind the enemy captain in terms of impacting lanes. So I really like that change. And Fish Food, the cast delay has been dropped down to 0.6 seconds. So basically just going to make those stuns a little bit easier to hit. Is this the unempowered version of Fish Food? or the empowered version of fish food?
This is the unempowered version.
Unempowered version.
The empowered version has not changed.
Not changed. Okay, yeah. So this is just going to mean that if you aren't stood on water, there isn't that sizable delay. You're going to see a slightly snappier. You see what I did there? A clam come out of the water and find the stun. So just making it a bit more fluid to play Lorelei, especially when you aren't. Obviously, you always want to be positioned on those sources of water, but if you aren't, you might still manage to have that impact with this ability.
That is correct.
Okay, Malene, Enchanted Transfer. Oh, well, we're still hammering Malene away with the banhammer, but we'll see what she's happened to.
We're working on it.
So Enchanted Transformation. So this is all about her ultimate getting changed. Again, base damage is down, crystal ratio is down, and cooldown is up. So basically, nerfs across the board for what was a very powerful ability.
Yes. In addition to the tune down to Aftershock, we're hoping this brings Malene into a more reasonable amount of damage. Her ultimate was very unrespondable. She would switch forms, hit you real quick. You'd either be slowed or you'd take a huge burst of damage. And there was not much counterplay behind it. With this change, yes, your damage is reliable, but it is not nearly as impacting as it was before. This means that a good Malene has to land her abilities or combo. She has to hit with both her A's, ribbons, and tendrils, in addition to utilizing her ultimate.
So no longer can you basically just switch forms, get your Aftershock proc, and bully your opponent out of lane. This is kind of trying to mold Malene into what she was supposed to be, which is this heavy combo style mage who's supposed to be able to chain her abilities together to get the maximum damage output. Because Aftershock made it that you could just hit your dark transformation, hit your light transformation, get Aftershock procs, and annoy the hell out of your opponent. So these changes intended to bring Malene's power level down across the board, but overall trying to move her towards that heavy combo orientated playstyle that I think you were looking for when you designed the character.
Sonata who was with us earlier, was actually the lead designer on Malene. Well,
Sonata, thank you for joining Salia, and thank you for creating such a broken hero. Carry on. I'm sure she's going to be fine. If not this update, definitely the next one. Finn, we talked about it.
I still have my bag of tools.
Still got him. Finn, again, we talked about it, the Water Denizen. Reza, Troublemaker, crystal ratio down by 20%. I do think Troublemaker was the core point of Reza's kit that was giving him that massive oppression. Like, it was so difficult to trade against Troublemaker's Troublemaker's his passive, right?
It's his B.
It's B. Okay. So this is not the part of the kit that I always for, but it is part of the kit that kind of it synergized in the same way that his heroic perk did. That it was very difficult to trade against a Reza who would A, B, and get the massive on-hit damage that you got from Reza, especially if they landed their A. I guess it's just trying to tune down that on-hit damage of the B, so that you can still play around the A, but obviously the B was making it very difficult when he went in because it was so difficult to trade against him.
So there's a couple things coming into this patch. Some people make it a point, like, hey, how come you only did so much? And don't get me wrong, this seems like a smaller change to what people expected. There is multiple things coming in that will affect Reza, though, indirectly. The Aftershock reduction, he loses damage there. The new Slumbering Husk, it does incredible against him. The new defensive support, flying barrier to mitigate that burst, or the increased healing that you're going to get with Capacitor Plate, means Reza has to push through that much more barrier or shield and get that damage out. So there is multiple indirect nerfs, if you may, coming into this patch that are going to affect him.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. They see this and say, oh, it's like a really small change. But realistically, when you combine that, like you said, with all of the different itemization changes and all the new defensive options that are available, Reza's got a lot more obstacles to overcome to actually get that same damage output now. So yeah, I think this will definitely make him trading against him in lane feel a little bit easier. But Reza has hurdles to overcome in teamfight situations and skirmishes now.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh wow, Samuel still getting hit, small chips at a time. 5% off his empowered malice and verdict again. Good Samuels definitely felt oppressive to play against. If after their sort of first or second item spike, they were hitting you like a truck with malice and verdicts. Just trying to slightly tune that down, I guess, here, Niv.
Correct. We really want the AoE aspect of Malice and Verdict to really be the special part of it. It's great that it does more damage, but it was just Samuel is a consistent damage dealer. He is not supposed to burst down the enemy carry in a few seconds, and he could do this in roughly 3 Malice and Verdicts, well-placed Malice and Verdicts. This was not his intended. We want him to sort of be at this point where he's the consistent damage mage that you pick up. He already comes with a high sustainability, good kiting ability. He has very few weaknesses as a whole, so like we don't want him, and he does good consistent damage. We don't want him like bursting on top of all that.
Okay, and moving on, Scarf now matches visuals better. I'm guessing this is to make it more.
This that's actually has been pulled already as of today. I'm sorry, I should have removed that.
So this is gone. Are we saying this is gone?
Yes. Don't worry about that.
All right.
We will be visiting that just a little bit later.
Well, it's now deleted from my documents, so goodbye, Scarf. Moving on to Sky. Suri Strike cooldown is down again. I guess this is just to aid her, specifically, I guess 5v5. Give her more options in team fights to be a bit more mobile.
Correct. With the lower cooldown, helps her come online a little bit sooner. Sky is very much a late game hero, and she relies on Suri Strike not to be able to maintain her forward barrage. So this change is really going to help her. Suri Strike is one of those things that make her feel particularly special and mobile, which is really what the identity of Sky is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you struggle with in 5v5 is Suri Strike. You reset that forward barrage, and then suddenly you've got to wait a couple of seconds. And really, if you're playing CP Sky, forward barrage is your kit. In a lot of ways, like it is the way that you deal your damage.
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, this is going to help her, and especially in 5v5, maybe be a bit more effective. Taka, attack cooldown normalized. What does this mean?
So most heroes, as I mentioned before, had 0.8 attack cooldown, and we lowered it down, most heroes down to 0.7. Taka was a special edge case who had a 1.1 or 1.0 after tuning. No, it was 1.0, and we brought it down to 0.9 attack cooldown. So it started off at 1.1, then we tuned it to 1.0, and then down to 0.9 actually. And we just so you know what, we should really normalize him. His auto attack really was very frustrating with any form of attack speed because you didn't get the full impact of it. You didn't scale as well with attack speed. So now Taka, who builds attack speed, you're going to find his attacks coming out much more quickly, much more fluid. It's going to feel really good.
Okay, and so is that down to 0.7 or is it 0.9?
It's 0.7.
Okay, and now we're going to get, obviously, the cooldown reduction reworks now 10% per stack, so that goes up to, is it 4 stacks that he gets, or is it?
5.
It's 5, and does this allow him to go over the cooldown reduction cap, or does this cap him with?
This does not count to the cooldown reduction cap. It's its own entity. That's why we sort of added it, just because to make it clear that this is not part of the cooldown reduction cap.
So when is this calculated? Is this calculated after or at the same time?
Of his abilities?
Yeah.
So Taka, upon use...
Yeah, okay, so sorry, I'm trying to work this out in my head. Explain it again, because I just interrupted you by mistake, because I'm tired.
No worries. One of the things, Taka gets his stack previous to using the ability, and then it calculates.
Yep.
So let's say you extratsued when it's max level, so you get 3 stacks. It will count. It won't count it at 2. It'll count it at 5, and then modify the cooldown, and then from there apply cooldown reduction, and then that is your
I got you. So what is happening here is that his House of Kamaka will reduce the overall cooldowns on its abilities, and then the cooldown reduction will apply to the then changed ability cooldowns from House of Kamaka. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So let's say his 10 seconds on Exretsu, he gets to 50%, it drops down to 5 seconds. Let's say he gets 45% cooldown reduction. That will then apply to 5 seconds. So you get something like 2.65 or 2.75 or something like that. Yeah, okay. All right, so overall, to be honest, this feels like Taka buffs across the board in a lot of ways. Obviously, the Aftershock nerf is going to hit him a little bit, because now we can see...
It was one of our, if the lowest win rate hero in the game. So he clearly needed some love, but it was very clear that Crystal Taka is just can be a little toxic. So with this change, Taka, you're not going to really notice any changes to Taka with his perk. That actually tends to end up pretty easily, but I feel you're going to find Weapon Taka to be a much more viable pick. Especially with the next change here.
Yeah, the Exretsu change. He's gone from a 0 to 150% weapon power ratio. With that, the normalization of his attack cooldown. Are you worried about weapon power attacker being oppressive?
There's a possibility.
there's a possibility, Niv.
I am not an oracle. The thing is, we've had experience with weapon power Taka in the past. There was previous weapon Taka that built like Tension Bow and Storm Crown and just stole your jungle, and that wasn't quite what we wanted. But there was previously weapon power Taka was actually the original design of Taka. The crystal ratios were added to really add an extra path. But as you can see, Crystal is like, I'm gonna Exretsu you, I'm gonna auto, then flip over you, and I'm gonna Kaku, and then when the Kaku duration is about ending, I'm gonna Exretsu you, I'm gonna flip over you, and you just repeated this, and there wasn't a lot of options for the recipient. In the situation of a weapon Taka, he needs to be there to attack you. He needs to be in your face. He can duck out and dodge, which is great because that's what we want Taka to do. But if he's going to deal the bulk of his damage, he has to be there.
So 150% on Exretsu, if I'm imagining Breaking Point Taka now, you get some immediate Breaking Point stacks upon Exretsu, and then you're going to start to chunk away, especially with the increased effectiveness of attack speed. If my
the base damage of the Exretsu is still crystal. It will not stack.
That's true. That's true. So you'll probably get 1 or 2 at max, I think, depending on your build. But it's a little bit of a boon when you go into a fight, and I guess that rewards Taka for making that Exretsu play without having the backup of the super high damage output that you'd get from the crystal damage side of things. But my word of advice, guys, if I'm going to give you any advice, it's ban Taka this update. just based on these changes, I feel like Taka is going to be super strong. But again, we'll have to see how that pans out. And that brings us to the end of all of our...
with a hammer to whack and
I can't wait. That brings us to the end of our very long edition of Update 3.4. We had.
I hate to interrupt, but you missed some of the most important changes.
Where's this? Have I just
so you started at 3v3, but you're missing out on 5v5 meta changes.
Where's the 5v5 meta changes? Oh my god, how did I miss this? Thank you, Niv. I actually don't know how I scrolled past this.
These are huge.
These are big. So lane minion defenses are up for the melee, siege captain, and ranged are down. So that's going to... it's going to change, I think, how many turret shots you have to calculate when dealing with ranged. I'm guessing it's just going to be 1 turret shot and then you can get the last hit now for most ranged minions. I think that was the way it was for most of them before, but it just means in the earlier stages of the game, less weapon power means you might be able to get that basic attack off more easily, making it easy to farm under turret. Also means that you can clear them out, because they are the problem minions when it comes to stacking waves. They are the problem minions that create huge minion wave pushes. Ranged minions always have been across all MOBAs. Those are the minions that generally deal the most damage and generally push the waves the hardest. So they're easier to clear now, basically. Easier to clear those ranged minions. But the captain minions...
it's actually more difficult. Their armor and shield was -35, and now it's 0.
Oh, Oh yeah, there was a strike through on it, and I didn't notice. Okay,
No,
so
it's
it's actually
okay.
that's the
Yeah.
opposite. So basically, they're now tankier. Every
Yes.
minion is more tankier, so it's going to be harder to clear minion waves and make minion waves more
It's
impactful.
not super noticeable, but it does add up. This will essentially mean you have a little bit more defense, or like your minions are when you're sieging a turret, they just don't blow up your minions, and you're unable to approach the turret to deal damage. This also means that they can press against the turret a little bit harder, which I will get to when we get to the turrets because there are significant changes there.
Cool. Okay. Well, we won't discuss it too much until we get to those turret changes. Apologies, guys. I didn't see the minus that I'm highlighting on my screen right there. I am very tired. I'm about 2 hours sleep because I'm an idiot for going to bed at 4 a.m.
He's a hero for waking up this early to do this.
Armories respawn now after 200. So Zika did mention this on Reddit, and I think everybody who read that comment knew it was coming. Respawns after 220.
You spoiled it. I saw that. I knew they were going to figure it out. I knew it.
Respawns after 210 seconds. The minion defense booster is from 35 to 0, so you don't get a minion defense booster now and taking an armory, but you get minion empowerment on armory kills. So damage to structures is removed. The damage to minions has gone up though, and the reduced damage from heroes is also gone up. So basically, minion waves now push harder and receive less damage from taking an armory.
Damage. So because armies only affect the minions in that lane, the damage to structures was near useless because there is no structures.
Yeah.
You'll deal a little bit more damage to the vein crystal, but for the most part, it will not. Which then again, we didn't really like the amount of times that minions would win the game single-handedly just by pressing into the vein crystal. It's not a huge debuff in damage. It's like 10%, I believe, but it's no longer there.
Okay, so essentially, taking an armory now is going to feel like you've genuinely got super minions pushing in that specific lane. It is going to force the enemy to have to react to that lane more effectively and calculate and deal with those waves, and maybe consign them to that portion of the map a bit more regularly. However, if they hold out for long enough, they have that ability to come back.
Correct.
Yeah. There was also some changes to Armory's health and shield. Shield and armor has gone down, but the health has gone up. Is this just... What does it make them feel like? Are they a bit less tanky overall?
It's actually the same EHP.
Oh, okay. So the same effective HP across the board.
This is to equalize the change to turrets that we'll get to next.
I see. Okay. Turrets. The health is down in the early game, but they gain per level. I guess the same way that things like Blacklaw and Ghostwing gain per level.
Actually, turrets, while Ghostwing and Blacklaw do level up as the game progresses, turrets do not. They each have a set level that is at the start of the game that retains over the entire game. So there's a couple major things that are going to come up from this. One, turrets are no longer made of paper mache. You can walk up like and each consecutive turret is going to feel that much more durable.
Right.
Which was you were having two people come up to a turret and it's gone, or you'd get ganked and get pushed out of lane, but if it was after 5 minutes, your turret was gone. So these changes are essentially to stop turrets from being blown up, and then in addition to that, by shifting them to health, characters like Jewel or Kestrel who just destroy turrets will no longer blow them up quite as fast. They've always been super high DPS heroes, but turrets were reaching crazy amounts of armor and shield as the game progressed, which meant those heroes that bought a Bonesaw or had natural pierce had a severe advantage. Now it's just 100 damage or 100 armor and shield.
100 armor and shield across the board, but the health goes up across the game. So making just them being overall a bit tanky. So turrets feel like those structures that you need to commit resources to instead of just having one hero walk up to it and take it in 5 seconds, especially in the late game.
Yes, exactly.
The backdoor barrier total and the regen rate. So this is this is
to compensate for the armor and shield.
Yeah, and this is the barrier that you get when there are no minions nearby.
Correct.
And it's now significantly beefier and regens a lot heavier, so you have to commit a huge amount of more resources if you want to try and make a backdoor attempt without properly making that setup happen with minions.
It's not as significant. It's actually going to feel very similar.
Oh,
the
really?
reason why is because the armor and
shield, yeah.
being lowered will make those less significant.
But overall, with the health changes as well, it means that it'll be slightly harder to make a backdoor turret attempt happen. Yeah.
They're roughly, the first one's I think 15% more durable. The second one's roughly 20% more durable, and the third one is roughly 25% more durable.
Yeah.
They feel pretty sturdy now. We'll keep an eye on them though, of course.
And the gold changes here. The global gold down to 50 gold for everybody, but you also now get a localized bonus turret gold, which is something that League of Legends does as well, so that the people who are in that lane reap the most benefit, but it doesn't snowball other lanes. So let's say you have one lane snowballing out of control. That lane will snowball more heavily, but it doesn't mean that every other lane in the game is going to snowball like crazy too.
Yeah, so one of the issues we've seen, especially in competitive play and high-tier play, snowballing is a major factor. Games are ending and are being decided very early. And part of this is due to the global gold that is available through Ghostwing, through the turrets. You take down the first 3 turrets, that's 150 gold split among 5 people, 750 gold times 3. Like, it adds up. It really does. And then you take the Ghostwing, which is another 300 times 5 with 1,500 gain. It just compounds on itself. And there was benefit upon benefit, and it was creating strong snowball effects. With this change, you're going to find that more of the gold is centralized on the people who were there. But the gold differential between the two teams is not going to be as huge, which is going to slow down the snowballing that was occurring.
Yeah, and this is just the sort of anti-snowball mechanisms for the game-wide spread. Ghostwing, basically gold down for taking Ghostwing. He was a global objective that again contributed to snowballing if a team was ahead, and so now the global gold overall going down for Ghostwing. And joy upon joy, he now attacks the nearest target, making juggling aggro of Ghostwing not the biggest pain in the ass that you've ever had to deal with in your entire life.
It's always going to attack the nearest person now.
Yes,
always.
This is a change that I was crying out for since the inception of these two objectives. It means that, it doesn't matter who engages Ghostwing now. You can just have your tank turn up to him and turn him away from the party. And yeah, same with Blacklaw. Nice change, quality of life change for taking these two objectives. Very much needed. And finally, Blacklaw, the captured. I'm guessing this is the gold you get when you kill Blacklaw when it's captured.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to go down slightly. Just to basically the same way you're not getting rewarded too heavily for losing. Yeah,
it's lowered a little bit to limit global gold, but not as heavily because you're on the back foot already. Let's not punish you even harder for being on the back foot.
But his weapon power per levels has gone up, so it means when he hits structures, he's going to hit a little bit harder, because it did feel like some cases that the most impactful thing Blacklaw did was do his fire breath, and then when he went to hit turrets, it felt like he was slapping them with a wet towel. Like, it was just kind of. I guess it compensates for the turret changes as well, overall. Yeah. But he did feel like I guess I don't know how much of a difference this makes. I'm guessing the weapon power per level means he's going to hit a little bit harder in the late game. But overall, with the effective turret changes, you're going to see a similar amount, I suppose.
That's correct.
Yeah. I got a little bit ahead of myself, because every time I see Blacklaw hit a turret, I'm like, Blacklaw, you're like whacking it with your giant claws, and you're probably taking about 2% HP off. But I guess Blacklaw is there a little bit like Kraken. The primary thing is to draw turret aggro so that your team can play around it.
So a couple things. One, yeah, that's going to make you're not going to really feel it early on if you take him early. This really will just help close out a game, though, later on.
Yeah.
As the game progresses, this just means Blacklaw is going to grow that much stronger as the game progresses. So he's going to help close out a game a lot easier, which will, with these changes coming in, there's a lot of changes coming in that will increase game length time. This is one of those things that will counteract that a little bit.
Because one of the big discrepancies that we saw in Vainglory was that high-tier games often ended quickly because of snowballing, and low to mid-tier games, people had difficulty closing the game. So you had games that would go on for a very long time. So it was like a big spread across the board about what teams, and this is basically some of these changes that try to address snowballing in the late game, snowballing in the early game for high tier gameplay, but give the lower tier gameplay more options for closing out and making it a bit easier to close out when you take these big objectives like Blacklaw.
That's correct. And remember, a lot of these numbers are still all very early. I mean, most of these are locked in, but these are all subject to change. We're still tuning a little bit here, a little bit there. We still have a little bit of time, so there may be a few changes to this sheet.
Right, that is. Hopefully, I haven't missed anything else.
No, I think you got.
I think we got it all. That was really, really good to have you on, and Sonata as well.
Sorry this took so long.
Do you know what? It was a big update, and I think I'll put timestamps in the description for everybody so they don't get too lost in this 90-minute video that's going to be going out. But it's really insightful to have this kind of information coming from the developers themselves and have that kind of conversation. So I know a lot of people will appreciate this. So thank you so much, Nivmett.
It's my pleasure, buddy.
Rightio, guys, and if you've watched this far, kudos to you, because I certainly bloody wouldn't have. And I'll see you guys soon for another video. Bye.